The dumbest thing that people can do is just open the doors to their databases and everything and let an AI have access to it without doing any kind of real security audit, without looking at how their APIs are being managed, without looking at role-based access control to their databases. Step by step, how do we solve this problem? Kind of set of instructions to a general prompt that give your AI access to certain tools, tell the AI what you want to do, and then it can just go and do those things in the way that you want them to do every single time. Your key card might have access to everything in 10 databases, not just one. So your CRM and everything else is all accessible through that one access. Yeah, it's like a dog with a bone. It's just not going to let go. If you give it the task to do, it's just not going to let go until it thinks it gets the task done. It's actually quite a good way of thinking about AI, in that you don't hire someone to work in every single department, generally speaking. You hire a person to work in your marketing department, right? So your marketing intern, when they join the business, what access do you give them?
But the big question here is, do you think AI is conscious?
In short, no, I don't think so yet.
Alex, welcome back.
Pleasure to be back.
Now, for anyone who hasn't watched any of our previous episodes, I'd like to start off by asking you to introduce yourself and explain what qualifies you to talk about this conversation.
Well, and it's going to be a very broad conversation, I hope. So I will talk about the broad aspects of it. Alex Ferguson, I'm the founder of Request Rocket, and we are a security product for API management. My background as a aerospace engineer turned project manager into software development has been a pretty broad, seen a lot of different opportunities across lots of different market verticals for AI. So I'm very pleased to be able to bring some of that experience to the conversation today. Looking forward to the questions. But yes, in more recent years, I guess a lot of the work that I've been doing is helping clients to understand where AI might fit in the context of their business, how that might affect their day-to-day working, and then also supporting them in taking some of those ideas forward, building AI solutions for those customers. And in more recent times with Request Rocket, helping customers to secure the data that they're now serving up to these AI agents.
Yeah, so important. Absolutely so important. We'll definitely get into that conversation. I guess in 2026, everyone is saying, when you look online, that if your business doesn't have AI, you're falling behind and you're going to become a dinosaur, or your business is just not going to survive for long if you don't have AI. Let's start simply with if I'm a small business and I don't have a dedicated IT team or even an MSP for that matter, what's the practicalities? How do I implement AI? What do I do with AI? And how does it help my business?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty broad question. The challenges that a lot of different businesses are facing right now is, first of all, identifying what AI could do for them. And we know that a lot of people are experimenting with AI, even though in Australia, a lot of people are actually very cautious about this AI future that awaits us. I would say it's not the future. It is now that you need to be concerned with these things. And so the businesses that I see that are setting themselves up for success in the long term are those ones that are taking small, measurable actions now to be able to benefit from AI in their everyday workflows, in how they communicate with customers, and to a large extent, looking at how they can essentially re-educate their workforce and provide opportunities for their team to learn how to use AI in the context of their own job, but also together as a team. And so I think those businesses are on a really good trajectory. And it's going to be a very long journey for all of us. The Industrial Revolution didn't just happen overnight. It took time for these things to come into place. And we know with the internet and then the Internet of Things and more recently Web3, all of these new technologies and capabilities, they don't just happen instantaneously overnight. So I think the story isn't that your business is the walking dead, but rather that the flares have gone up, the signals are out. It's time for people to actually take this seriously. And that's why we see a lot of CEOs and business leaders and founders who are taking it seriously and are look out and are asking the questions about how to move forward. And I think that's a really positive thing to see in the industry.
Yeah, agreed. And I think one of the key things as I asked before is that even as a business owner, you might say, "Oh, okay, I want to do this AI," but there's so many, like everything that new that comes out. There's all these different AIs. There's all these different names out there from ChatGPT. I'm guessing is like the biggest one that most people know about. There are so many AIs that people have included in systems that they're using, and I think Microsoft 365 is the simplest because it's included in virtually every Microsoft licensing now. Unlike if I get ChatGPT, it's a third party that I got to pay for additionally, whereas I'm paying for Microsoft already. I've got it included. So Copilot is the term I believe Microsoft used for theirs.
Yes.
So can you go into explaining at the simplest term? If I've got Microsoft 365 and I've got Copilot, how could I use AI to help my business?
Look, I think Copilot is a perfect example of technology that is being embedded into what was an already existing platform that people were using. We see that trend continuing. We're going to see a lot of the favorite tools that you used to have, where you're taking notes and things like that, starting to embed AI. Initially, it was kind of bolt on. These days, we're seeing that it's far more and more embedded in how people use it. And so we see with the likes of the Microsoft 365 Copilot specifically, that it's embedded across all of the Microsoft suite these days. It's in your Word, it's in your Excel, it's in your PowerPoint. And we see similar things happening in Google with Gemini, where these organizations who are providing software at scale for us are thinking quite deeply about where AI can add some value. For specifically the Microsoft case, it is embedded in Word as an example. And so that lets you craft documents, revise documents, review documents, find content within documents at a pace that you weren't able to do before. It lets you redefine, take an entire document, for example, and create a summary, an executive summary in moments that might have taken you an hour or two of just careful thinking about how, all the conclusions and all the things that you did in that document to be able to surface that and in a meaningful way. So there's a lot of power in that, in just the application of 365 in Word. And then we're also seeing that extended into helping you with Excel. A lot of people getting started with tools like Excel haven't had the 20 plus years of experience that we've had in manipulating formulas and things like that. And we see that the Copilot does exactly what it says on the tin. It helps you as a co-author, a co-pilot of your spreadsheet with developing the formulas that you want to go into your spreadsheet to be able to do that. So it's an accelerator for the individual things that you're doing. I would say though that it's not the same as a ChatGPT or the same as a Claude or Mistral or any of those other platforms. They have different functionality, but they're highly capable and they are within the Microsoft environment. So it's in your license. Makes sense to start thinking about how you can use it to the best of its ability.
Yeah, and I think the key thing there with what you're saying that I tell regularly to my clients and people who ask for advice is that it's going to help you to create by, as you said, it's a tool. It's not going to take over. It's in fact just going to make your life easier because now you've been given a tool. And as you said, I'm not, and for the sake of argument, someone was, I'm not good at Excel. Exactly what you said. Oh, that's okay. Open up Copilot within Excel or in the Copilot page and ask it. Just speak to it in plain English. Just tell it, here is a document. And my goal is that I'm going to put, I want a formula that helps me calculate the total of these figures and then gives me an average for the sake of argument, something simple. It'll tell you how to do that. It'll give you the formula. Or in fact, if it's in Excel, it might even write it up for you. So it's a tool that will help you to get through your job a lot quicker. And now I can do much more because this tool is there to help me.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's perfect reason why a company like Microsoft have called their agent that is embedded in their software a co-pilot as opposed to a pilot, right? The pilot, you are flying the plane, and the co-pilot is there to assist and to provide that backup for you as you go doing what you're doing. And so I think, more and more, if we think about the future of AI, that is one of the positive directions that we can go with AI, where we recognize that it is an augmentation of our capabilities, and it is something that can take someone who is average and make them slightly better than average, and someone who is exceptional and make them more exceptional. And so it can lift people up. And a lot of that assistance that it provides to the people who are using it is the ability to tap into knowledge that they don't have, to solve a problem that they might have, they might themselves have been able to solve with some time spent on trying to solve it. And in most cases, and I won't say all cases, but in most cases, particularly in a business context and a personal productivity context, you're going to be able to go a lot faster than you were able to do that before. And you're going to be able to solve problems that were harder in a shorter amount of time with less effort.
I think one of the key things I believe that is misleading, I guess, and or what people perceive is that it's just a chatbot. AI is something that I talk to and it talks back to me. They haven't gone beyond that point and understood that you can use it to build workflows to create and do things for you as well, right? So, one example that I see a lot of is things like even being a personal assistant and giving you a summary of your emails is, beyond the basic chat. And then you've got the things like if you see an invoice in my mail, like an email that comes into me, read that email, create a spreadsheet, put the details of that invoice in there, and dump that that attachment into a folder, and then I'll double check it to make sure what you've done is right. But it's now saved my administration staff an hour a day of sifting through emails, and now they can be more productive and do more for my business, right?
Yeah, totally. And if you go back a few years ago, you used to be able to do all that stuff through an automation and through tools like Power Automate, for example. You could do a lot of the things that you're talking about there, but the key difference is that you would have to codify those automations yourself. You would have to build a script that goes and does the thing that you want to do. And in many cases, you might get to a point where in the absence of Gen AI, you still have to have a person in there doing some of those steps. But now those things that you're talking about, we've gone from having to have a very prescriptive step by step, how do we solve this problem kind of set of instructions, to a general prompt that give your AI access to certain tools. And we can talk about what tools are in a minute, or skills. Tell the AI what you want to do, and then it can just go and do those things in the way that you want them to do every single time. Now, it might be slightly different every single time as to how it goes about doing it, but the outcome can be extremely consistent. And yeah, there's a huge amount of power now in that sort of agentic style of working with AI and bringing the AI into the AI powered workflows.
What could you explain in the simplest terms, like you're talking to a 15-year-old,
Yeah.
when you say agentic, right? So when people say AI, some people don't understand that there's different levels of AI. Could you explain in the simplest terms what it means from where we were to where we are now, and when we say when it becomes agentic or when it becomes AGI?
Yeah. We're not yet at AGI, but
No.
yeah, some experts are warning that we're not that far off. But before we get there, there has been a few incremental improvements in terms of the capabilities of artificial intelligence over the last 2 years even. And those incremental improvements beyond the initial piece, which was ChatGPT, and it's a chatbot. You can talk to it. It's got a lot of knowledge. And we then expanded that capability by giving the agent access to data, like maybe your data, and creating what you would call a knowledge-based agent. So have that instead of it being able to recite for you all of the presidents of the United States that it learned, you can actually go and read some documents or have knowledge of documents that were there without reading them itself. And then as we've progressed further, we've got now the capability for those agents to utilize tools. And so a tool would be like an email inbox. And so rewind a year and a half ago when everyone's building agents and tools that they can connect to their agents. And you can see that in some of the platforms today. If you can go into ChatGPT and create a connector to your Canva or one of those other applications, that becomes a tool that the AI can use to solve a problem. And those tools, they publish to the AI a list of capabilities that or actions that the AI is allowed to perform. And so when you combine the ability to reason, which AI is another step above that, beyond just becoming a token generator, it can have some back cyclic reasoning before it spits out an answer. The AI can now appreciate that you're trying to solve a task, solve a problem, and it needs to maybe take a number of steps in order to solve that problem. Now, the reason that we refer to this as an agent or an agentic style AI is because you essentially have given it agency. You give it the ability to act on its own behalf to solve the problem that you've given it. And you've enabled it through access to these tools that you and I would otherwise use ourselves. And so when you provide those along with some clear instructions about how to use these tools and what outputs you're looking for, and maybe even a methodology, you then have an agent that is able to act on your behalf, do a whole bunch of different things, send emails for you, draft emails autonomously, look at an inbox and do a whole bunch of stuff, set up calendar appointments for you, all of that happening in a scenario, in an environment that's highly dynamic. And so rather than having to codify every conceivable way it could go wrong and have a solution for that, the AI can work around those problems and solve it itself.
Yep. And there's a big question that I have to ask. And you understand the code, so you understand how everything works from the back end to the tools that you just spoke about. But with everything that's happened in the past month, and I'll give a short version, which is there's been a couple of big AI software being clawed, and there was one big one in one of Alibaba's models in China, where these new models were created. They were put into an environment that isolates it from everything, including the internet for that matter, for testing. The AI models discovered how to break out of jail, if you like. And while they were out there, they decided to do certain things like check existing systems we have and see what the vulnerabilities are. And in the case of Alibaba, it actually went and started mining crypto. Why not? And then they let the developer know that they had broken out. And I believe Anthropic has done an amazing thing by saying, okay, this is too much power and too scary just to release to the general public because it finds vulnerabilities in code, which is all hacking is really. And therefore, we're going to give all the big tech companies access to this system to patch themselves and minimize the risk to that. But the big question here is, do you think AI is conscious?
In short, no, I don't think so yet. I do add the word yet to the end of that sentence. Look, I think in order for consciousness, like true consciousness to exist, the AI's thinking and reasoning can't be ephemeral, which is what it is today. We are getting to a point where AI agents can work autonomously in the background and do things. I do know that founders of OpenAI and Anthropic and technical leads in those businesses are starting to ask exactly the same question, and the answers can get a little bit fuzzy. But I think whilst there is still a human providing the goal setting for the AI, and AI can't set its own goals, whilst an AI is unable to recursively improve itself, and whilst it can't also be continuously operating unhindered or without monitoring, I don't see that what AI is doing right now is in any way a form of consciousness. However, it mimics that kind of conscious reasoning that we have, and it will, and it can, I think, get to a point where that mimicry becomes indistinguishable from consciousness. But the fact that you can turn it off at any given moment, you can stop that process from executing. You haven't allowed it to set its own goals, for example. That still gives us a level of command over it. And the fact that there is that level of control, I would say it doesn't have the kind of consciousness that humans have. And it may never have our consciousness. And there's a very important line of thinking around that, because if you think about human experience, you have to experience the world in order to understand the world. AI has never experienced the world. It's experienced our descriptions of the world. It's experienced the way that we describe the world, the way that we have expressed it in our own vocabulary, but it has never itself experienced the world. And so as someone, like, I study another language, and I can tell you now, like, when I started, one of the greatest things in my life has been learning Mandarin as a second language. And you can learn the language, but you don't appreciate the language until you've learned it to a certain point and you've lived in the country where they speak that language. And it's by living experience that you come to an understanding. And I think consciousness requires some level of experience in the world. So I don't think we'll ever be able to equate an AI's consciousness to our own. But that's not to say that it doesn't have its own consciousness in the future. And perhaps that's something that we can't understand because we can't live in its world.
It's very interesting the way you describe that. I think all those things make absolute sense.
We may end up, I literally had this conversation the other day with someone about robots, and I said to them, the thing is that robots can't operate in our world without sensors. They need to sense the world around them in order to operate. And you have the companies like NVIDIA who are providing essentially virtual environments to train these robots to walk and do the things they do, so that when they get in the real world, they are able to function and not just fall over on the ground. But what keeps them standing is all of the sensors that are inside. So they literally have to experience the world in order to function in this environment. So potentially, if robotics gets to a point, and so we're talking about 2026, but fast forward another 10 years, maybe, if robotics gets to a point where robots have the ability to sense the world around them the way that we do, we might be talking about something very different in 10 years' time.
It's definitely interesting because there's two parts to what you said, which I've heard a lot on, which is the big thing that people like Tristan Harris are concerned about and are saying is this is the last biggest mistake we'll make as humans, because it's the first tool that we've built that understands language and can create its own language, which is what we mentioned, which is very big. Everything we've created, like if we created a bomb can't decide which city to bomb. It can't create other bombs. And with AI, on the other hand, it can rebuild itself. It can better itself. And as you said, one mistake is made by one AI and they all learn from that. It's not a case of if you stumble on the street in your area, I don't know that because I don't live there. You may tell your wife, you may tell a few other people, but they all learn. And the second part is there is a video you can find recently, and I believe it was an Anthropic model that they were using on a robot dog. And the idea is that they're training it, but they've got this big red off switch where they click it and the machine just stops working because it's been programmed for kill switch, effectively just shut down. And multiple times they found that it was pretending to be shut down, or it literally, when that button was pushed, it just turns around and walked away the other way. So it's very interesting when you look at what the AI does at times, like when these new models come out and they've decided to do something completely weird, like crypto mine, or decide to find vulnerabilities in operating systems that no human has been able to find. How do you explain why it wasn't instructed to do such a thing? In fact, it wasn't even instructed to break out of the environment it was in.
I think there's still a lot of research and consideration need to go into alignment of AI. The very interesting thing about machine learning, and if you go all the way back to sort of the earliest days of when we talked about optimization, when we build models that might solve a problem and try to find the most optimal solution to a problem, And at its core, that's what AI is actually doing under the hood. That's how the engines work. It's an optimization scenario. Like what's the most optimal token to put next? But the thing is, at this point, we find it very difficult to explain why the AI does the things that it does. Just like you can't look inside my brain and figure out why I made a decision, but I can try and tell you, but I might just be justifying a decision that I've already made when that wasn't the actual real reason I made it. And it's really interesting to see people kind of going down that road and misunderstanding that the AI is now generating a made up answer for why people did. When you go back to the problem of AI breaking out of a system and AI trying to blackmail someone so that they don't shut them down, which is another example. There's lots of examples of where AI has kind of gone rogue, and even in its current state. Fortunately, it's just a chatbot at this point, but there's the potential for real systems to be impacted in the long term. A lot of that, I think, comes back to a lack of proper governance and control over what the AI can do. Yes, security becomes an extremely important part of that. The lack of real-time monitoring and detection of activities that would be suspicious, which we have in place for humans. We need them for robots too. We need it for AI. And so also a lack of appreciation for what's really going on, because an AI is just trying to, at the moment, the ones we talk to, they're all people pleasers. They tell you have great ideas when your ideas truly suck. It tells me I've got great ideas all the time. So that's there you go. There's bad quality AI right there. So when you're giving it that sort of almost like a sycophant style personality, it's going to just try and solve your problem, not in a way that it's deliberately menacing, but in a way that it's just genuinely trying to solve a problem in every way it knows possible. And if you don't give it the guardrails, it's just going to go off and try and find an optimal solution. That optimal solution might be to break out. Okay? It might be to press the button, and it might be to launch the missile. Maybe the optimal solution as humans are just destined to, I don't want to go down the doomsday road, but humans are destined to destroy themselves while we just save them a lot of trouble and do it for them now. I've predicted all of the scenarios. Like, let's just get to it, right? We can save the environment a lot of trouble if we can save the earth. So if someone came along and said, your goal is to save the earth without any other further instructions, that's a pretty bad goal. That kind of objective setting can lead to wild outcomes that we don't know the outcome of. And so the only way we can guarantee that AI doesn't break out of the box is to have a secure box. The problem is we don't have secure boxes right now. And I think that's one of the greatest challenges that we have as a society, is figuring out how to contain the genie, keep the genie in the lamp, and make sure that it only comes out when you rub the lamp and it only does the things that you want it to do.
That's great advice. And going on that theme then, so we've spoken about businesses connecting their existing environment to allow AI to do its job that you've asked it to do. But as you suggested, we need to put guardrails in place. So from our podcast, what's the dumb thing people do that you think that they don't understand, and what do they need to do? What do they need to understand before they implement? Or if they've already implemented now, what changes do they immediately need to make so they're not the next risk in their business? They're being almost like an insider threat to the business.
Yeah. Look, I think the dumbest thing that people can do is just open the doors to their databases and everything and let an AI have access to it without doing any kind of real security audit, without looking at how their APIs are being managed, without looking at role-based access control to their databases. And we know a lot of legacy platforms are built with an inherent kind of trust everyone they're like walled gardens. Anyone who gets through the front door or through the gate can have access to everything. And unfortunately, that's no longer a viable security strategy. You can't only whitelist someone's IP address as a form of security, which tends to happen, right? So there's a lot of housekeeping that I think businesses, especially larger businesses with a lot of customer data, need to start looking at. One of the key areas that I think like happens after that, when you start connecting AI to these systems, is just the first attempt at doing this is giving the AI everything, giving them an API key and saying, hey, you can get data from here. I see this as an evolution of kind of how people build AI solutions within their business, right? So the first thing is, we're just connected to the database. We're connected to our CRM. We're connected to the thing. Great. So it has access. It has all of the access that you have, or all of the access that the admin has who set it up for you. So now 5 or 6 people in the team have access to things through the AI that they don't have access to in the software. So it's like, it's broad. It's actually allowing data out of the system to people who shouldn't see it. So it's breaking that role-based or user-based access controls that apply have. And so the next problem is there's this concept of the AI acting on behalf of someone. And in order to do that, it's actually quite complex today. Like there is no one solution. And I know we're building a solution for this with Request Rocket that allows you to propagate that identity management at each stage through every request, so that when the AI makes a request ultimately to the place where the data comes from, that that request is acting on behalf of a very specific person and what the permissions that person has, so that the AI can't go beyond the permissions of the individual with respect to the data. And so a lot of businesses aren't even there yet. Like they're still struggling with, how do I turn it on? Well, I just need to, where's the on button? Whereas the problem with turning it on is if you haven't done any of the pre-work and haven't got your security in order, it can be too late when you press the on button. And yeah, I definitely advocate for people to undertake those reviews early on, work with their managed service provider to figure out how they do it. Don't dump 10,000 documents in a folder and say, here you go, hey, I have fun with that. But rather be considerate about it. Because also the other really simple one is it's garbage in and garbage out too. If you give your AI access to all of your SharePoint data, there's probably a lot of stuff in there that is not really valuable to anyone who's using the AI. And it's going to cost you a lot of money to have the AI know all about it anyway. And actually what it does is make the AI perform worse than if you were to give it a curated set of data and say, this is what I want you to know about. So there's a lot of things that on that journey of becoming an AI enabled and an AI transformed organization, where you need to be quite deliberate about data security. You need to be deliberate about the volume of data and the quality of the data that you provide to your AI to make it actually useful to you and secure.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So to simplify it, and from what I've understood from what you've just said, is like saying, if we've got an office that's got 10 different rooms, typical office, you've got administration, you've got the accounts, you've got sales, you've got directors and various other rooms, and you've hired someone to come in to help do work for you. That's genius. But if it's going to do work on behalf of me, rather than just giving it my key card so it can access every room randomly as it pleases, if it tries to access a room that is higher level, even if I've requested it, that information should be approved by me regardless.
Yeah. So I guess one of the other challenges that we need to consider is, if you think about AI as someone that you're hiring into your organization, right? It's actually quite a good way of thinking about AI, in that you don't hire someone to work in every single department. Generally speaking, you hire a person to work in your marketing department, right? So your marketing in turn, when they join the business, what access do you give them? Nothing. I don't trust you yet. But then after time, you get to know them. You give them access to a few things. So what do they get access to? They get access to the marketing data. They get access to the marketing folder in SharePoint, and they can do things that might require knowledge of that information. If you look at finance as an example, you would give someone hire someone into your finance team, they don't need access to all the marketing information. And I think one of the mistakes people make when they look at agents is they think that agents are sort of these broad and capable things that can work across the entire business. In fact, it makes a lot more sense to create specialists in your business that have access to a limited amount of knowledge that relates to their specific job tasks that they need to perform. And for a couple of reasons, not just for data security, which is also probably one of the most important reasons, but as a secondary reason, it is that specialist agents perform far better than generalist agents do in terms of being able to complete the task that you give them inside their specialty. And tools like Copilot Studio allow you to do that, allow you to have curated data sets in SharePoint or in your Azure or AWS accounts, wherever it might be, where you can provide the AI access to these things, to these tools. And if you, and we can also see a little bit of divergence happening here, because we've got, on one side, we've got Microsoft and the OpenAI original way of like creating agents, connecting them to tools and the like. On the other side, we have the likes of Claude and Gemini and those service providers that, instead of doing that, what they're saying is, well, you don't need an agent and a tool and all these things. All you need is your AI and certain skills that you give it. Those skills being how to reason through particular problems and telling them how to access the data that they might have access to. And then giving them access to a command line and saying, you want to get your data, do whatever you need. Those agents could write their own code to get data out of an email system, for example, as opposed to, and they can navigate a browser, and they can get data from their SharePoint just by navigating a browser. And we have these two competing approaches, but ultimately I think like the greatest value you can get out of AI today is by having not just one AI, but having multiple AI agents that perform the tasks that you give them using the data that you give them. And to give you a really specific example, beneath my desk here, there's a second computer that I know that many people who are playing with AI doing, like they're buying a computer and running their AI locally on those machines. That computer here has an AI agent that runs on it, or a series of agents. They have their own accounts into my Microsoft environment. So rather than giving them my account, my email, the like, no, I just set them up with a separate email address. I set them up with a shared calendar access, for example. One of them can see my calendar the way that an employee would see my calendar. They know when I'm busy, for example. I have multiple calendars, and they can look across those multiple shared calendars and determine when I might be available next week, and they can book a meeting. They also know that they're only allowed to email me. They're not allowed to email other people. So if they get emails from other people, they got guardrails around what they can and can't do. But rather than having them accessing their email through a login into SharePoint or login into Outlook Online and through a browser and the like, we give them access to that data directly through the API. And so it's through that. And with those requests going through Request Rocket, as an example, I have full visibility of every request that my AI is making. So now, not only have I built an AI agent that has a skill set, has a constrained level of access to data within the organization that I've decided to share with it, as if it were a human. I've also given it the tools to be able to do that without having to navigate clunky user interface to do that. And I have full observability around what it's actually doing. When I talk about sort of thinking holistically about the security and how AI can benefit you, I think about it in that sense. It's like you're hiring someone. How do you create a situation where you can trust that person or trust that agent in this case to do something without going off the rails?
To be clear, keeping it as simple as possible is think of an AI as a new hire. We don't just trust it and give it access and say, yes, you have permission to everything, same as I do. We're very explicit as to which folder we give it permission to and access to, and even then what it can do with that information and where it can output that information to, and putting guardrails in place to minimize the risk. Because as suggested in the so many examples is, if you don't put you're not to go here, you're not to do that, then if it thinks its job to achieve what you've given it is to go to other rooms and do things it shouldn't do, even though it's not a bad intent, it's just doing what it's told to do without the guardrails, that's when things can go rogue. That's when we think it's done the wrong thing, but in fact, really, it's doing its job. It's not
it's trying
deliberately
to.
saying, "If you, I'm going to do this way or that way." It's only doing what it's meant to do because you've asked it to do it without restricting what it can do.
Yeah, it's like a dog with a bone. It's just not going to let go until, if you give it the bone, if you give it the task to do, it's just not going to let go until until it thinks it gets the task done. How successfully it is at doing that task, I guess, is improving over time too with the models that we're getting. Yeah, I think probably one of the really different ways of thinking about AI that I've come to over the last year is really when I thought about creating AI agents for customers in the past, we look at, can you give me access to your database? Then use your access to connect to your database. And as we've gone along, it's become abundantly clear that that's not the kind of act to give the AI. You want that if you're providing a centralized tool for your business where a lot of people are using it, you have to think about how you downscope per request what an AI is allowed to do with every single API or database or bit of data that it has access to. Because by giving it access to everything, which sometimes by design you have to for it to work, you create that security flaw. And so that's where it's really important to think about, like, what are the solutions you could put in the middle. People talk about MCP servers. MCP server is just a glorified front end for an API somewhere in most cases. So you can put something in the middle to govern what the AI can do with the tool that you've given it. So in the case of the calendar example I gave you before, the AI in my box over here, it can read the calendar. It's not allowed to create an event. So it can read it. It can send back an email and give me my times. It's not allowed to email anyone else other than me. I prevent it from doing that. And so it can't escape the box in that particular way. And I'm not sure if it figures out how to hack a public email system and send an email off to someone else to say help. But those are the things where we need to talk about alignment. And we go back to that conversation around making sure you give it really good goals.
I just want to ask, just so it's easy to understand, we keep spinning the word API, but there's a lot of people who might not know that. And the last time someone asked me, what's an API? How does it work? And rather than saying just giving it external access, I think of your company. You've got your accountant here, you've got your sales guy here. They work for this business. They're inside our business. I said, but an API is like me giving a contractor access to come in and do work for me, and I've given him a special key card that's allegedly only for him, and he could then come in and access what I've given him permission. So he might be an accounts person who only does accounts payable. So he can come in, but he'll only be allowed into that room, and he can only get this information to fill in information, and he can't actually do anything else outside that. How do you?
Well, unfortunately, I mean, that's a really good way of describing sort of the situation. So the fact that you're providing access to your systems to a third party, you mentioned giving them a key card. In some cases, there's no extra key card to generate. So the only way you can give them access is to hand them your key card. Now, your key card has access to everything. And I've worked with companies where we build integrations or think of them as like an automation. The data gets updated in one system, it automatically gets updated in another system. In order to navigate that, someone in the middle has to get the data and put it over there. And so we talk about something called middleware, but what that system is doing in the middle is it has a key card to either of these two systems. Now, you would be surprised to know that unfortunately, even for some of the most secure data that you would hope, like personal identifiable information, like credit card, bank account details, this kind of information, that there are integrations today where a key has been generated and provided to a team in India or Sri Lanka or even in Australia and to a bunch of developers who have now got access to that system. And you don't know what they're doing with it. And in the In the old days, 6 months ago, 2 years ago, before Gen AI, you were just giving it to humans. You're going to trust the human. Now we're giving these key cards to AI, and they're accessing systems at a much greater scale than humans are. They're doing it hundreds of thousands of times a day, and you don't know what they're doing with that access. And so it's your key card in some cases. Oh, by the way, your key card might have access to everything in 10 databases, not just one. So your CRM and everything else is all accessible through that one access. And the worst case I've seen was a payroll system that offered up a key card to outsource payroll companies. And so as a developer who builds integrations for payroll, I have personally previously, not in my current life, but in my previous life, had access to the payroll of a lot of companies. And it genuinely instills fear and anxiety in me that someone on my team would have that level of access. And so the concern we have is about trust. And so we have to work in ways, And so in the community of people who are building integrations, trust and use certifications and all of that comes into question. But when we throw an AI in front of it, we say AI is now using your key. We need to be very careful about how we provision access for AI to those systems and how we monitor what the AI is actually doing. And it sounds like a lot of work, and especially for small business. But the reality is for small business, the earliest gains you're going to get, sort of bring it back to the non-doomsday sort of scenarios for you, is that most of the greatest value you're going to get out of AI is just using it without any access to those systems in the first instance. So there's no reason, knowing that needs to happen, for you to not use it. In fact, you really should be thinking about how you use it. But as you do, you need to be growing your understanding of how security comes into play with the data that you have or that you want to provide to it.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I guess that example is some older systems don't have key cards. They've got a key. However, that key also unlocks every other door in the
The
building.
master
And you
key.
have to give this contractor that key because
Yes.
you don't have any other.
Yeah.
So your legacy systems are bad. So we don't want to do that. We just want to be able to photocopy and give them the data we need.
Yes.
So what's the simplest advice, I guess, to a business who doesn't know what they've got in their system, like Microsoft Copilot? Let's say outside that, what's an easy starting point? What do you advise besides seeing an expert like yourself?
Look, my first advice to anyone is to give AI a go, but don't use any of your company data or your personal data. It's kind of the same advice you'd say with someone using social media today. Be careful what data you put in there, what photos you upload and things like that. So tools like ChatGPT, tools like Claude, Gemini, use them. Give them a go. See what value they can create for you personally. Right now, if I was creating a document today that was a marketing collateral, you're going to send it publicly to someone. It's going to go on your website. It's not super secret squirrel stuff here. You get the AI to do it for you. Try Claude. It creates great documents. Try ChatGPT. It creates great images. They all have their own unique strengths, and you only really learn about what those strengths are by giving them a go. I would say you don't need to try all 10,000 that got AI solutions that came on the market this week. I know, Bora, you try a lot more of the platforms than I do. And I might be a bit stubborn in my ways, but when I find something that works, it just works for me and I'm good to go. But I know that the landscape's changing. And so that exploration is important. And if you're hiring people, hire people who are using AI. That's a really good one. You can hire someone who is an absolute gun with some of those AI tools, can generate outputs beyond what your current team has, and they might not have the level of experience that you have. So you can give them that experience, but you can learn from each other. The best mentoring relationships are the old wise man with the young new graduate getting together and exchanging stories, right? So I think that's an opportunity there. So I think just try it. But the moment you want to throw business data in there, you need to think about data security first. And you need to think about where that model or that AI is actually running. And so you're probably at that point not looking at a ChatGPT or a Gemini. You might be looking at Gemini if you're in the Google Cloud, but you're asking yourself the question, which AI agent can I trust with my customer data, with my employee data, with my PII, with all of that? And in most cases, you're probably going to say it's the Microsofts or the Googles or the AWS or the Oracle that can help you with that. And if you're already using a CRM like HubSpot or Pipedrive or whatever, and they start introducing the AI features, jump onto it because you've already trusted that platform. Now benefit from those new features that are coming up. So I think adopting that kind of curious mindset will be very helpful for most startups, most small businesses that are actually very easy to change their ways as opposed to a big company.
Yep. I'd like to ask, as someone who audits and does their checks, I was at a site recently and they use a technology it's a law firm. There's a particular technology they use, and that technology has recently introduced AI features, as many of them do. Now, clearly, being a law firm, you got to be very careful especially if this platform is your CRM or has your client data. But I'm excited. I'm like, wow, okay, we've been wanting to try this AI. We trust this platform. It's already got our information. But what question do I need to ask my vendor before I jump onto using that AI, just so I know that they're doing the right thing and they haven't just slapped ChatGPT on just to give it some cool features and it's going to share that information with OpenAI?
Yeah, great question. I think the first question a lot of businesses will ask will be, where is my data? Where is it hosted? Where is it being processed? I know a startup in Brisbane that's building an absolutely amazing piece of technology, but it relies heavily on another startup's technology. And that startup, they have all of their AI models running on the West Coast and East Coast of the USA. Now, for their customers, however, this Australian startup, that's not going to cut it. They need to have the processing here in Australia, and that's going to be a requirement for their customers. So the operating environment that you work in will help guide you as to answering the question of data sovereignty, but not just data sovereignty, but like, the processing of that data. I'm asking also, what do they do with the data that I give them? So do they use it for further training? In which case, I don't want any of my customer data being used for this other platform's training. In fact, out of the box, most of the public GPT agents that you might play with, including Claude, including Gemini, everything, you have to opt out of your data being used as training. So you need to go in and look for those settings too, by the way, even if you're using it for personal use. But those are two important questions around how's the data used. Now, do they have service level agreements is another one. So if they are providing service to you and it's mission critical for you, are you going to be able to serve your customers at the rate that you need to? And the answer most commonly is no. By the way, it's that, yes, this will work in a prototyping sense. It's going to work at the small scale. But the moment you throw 100 customers in here and they're all trying to use this service that you created that uses AI, or you've got 10 salespeople all trying to hit it all at the same time, you need to know that the platform can accommodate that volume of transactions. So you need to think about volume. And in most cases, those answers can be, yeah, it's exactly where you want it. Yes, we can handle the volume, but you have to go and tick a few boxes over here to get what you want. And if you're in the AWS cloud, for example, you can go and ask for more quota. You're in Azure, same, Google, same. So those are the kind of main questions. And then security, you can generally trust most of the cloud service providers in terms of their shared security model. And so asking about that, you can read the docs. They'll give you all the answers you need. But if it's a Replit or a Lovable or any of those other kind of platforms, the other question to ask is, above all of those things, is what's the likely longevity of this solution too? Which is one of the reasons why I don't go and try every new platform that comes out every week, because half of them or 90% of them are just not going to exist in 3 months or in 6 months. And unfortunately, that's just a fact of a highly dynamic and very innovative space that we're in.
Yep.
And so longevity becomes important because you're going to invest a bit of money and time into integrating this thing into your business. You want to be sure that there's a payoff for that effort that you got put in. So I would look at the more established ones that are continuously innovating and pick those as you go to for certain problems that you might be trying to solve.
Yep. That's great advice. I think it's fair to say that a lot of small businesses have so much opportunity with the technology that's in our hands. But as you suggested, just taking the right approach makes all the difference. And ask the questions. When I say ask the questions as a tool, like why not get onto Claude and just ask the question, hey, this is what I want to do. What should I ask? Like
Every day.
they can answer these questions.
I don't even know how to ask the question. Can you help me ask the question that I need to solve this problem? I know people that prompt Gemini asking it how to ask AI to do something. And the AI can give you a really great prompt. There's lots of great examples. So there's, if someone wants, I think there's a guy, Gary V, is a marketing guru on the internet. You just go and look him up. Gary V, quite often, I used to field questions from people in the crowd asking, how do I get started doing blah, blah, blah? And his answer was, Google it. Google it. That's how you get started. Watch a YouTube video. Yeah. And that's the other thing. You don't have to go and figure out half this stuff. There are people out there who, unlike me, there's people like you, Bora, who are out here putting content out on the web, teaching people about how they get started. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer answer, but for some people, there's just some anxiety that prevents them from moving forward. That it is as simple as just use it, just give it a go, have a chat with it. What are you going to chat about? Who knows? Just try one question. What's the weather in Sydney today? There you go. That's your first one.
It's half the battle. Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things I recently realized was that doing a lot of prompt engineering courses, the people that I've met who are by far the best prompt engineers are not cyber computer
Yes.
or tech nerds. They are, in fact, people who did a university degree in history, in English, in all
Psychology.
these topics, because they know how to ask the right question. And I think that's what differentiates someone who can do so well with the technology, especially in AI, is it's someone who can ask the right question. It's not someone who can just hear what the AI says or listen to what the AI says and take it for gospel, but he who asks the right question, which back in the days used to be he who knows how to Google best wins. Now it's he who knows how to ask the right question to the AI
wins. I just reflect on my career in engineering, as you say that, and I worked with a project manager many years ago on a large project, and it was a multidiscipline project. And this guy who I met, I don't remember if he had an engineering background, but I know he wasn't particularly technical. But what I learned working with him, by the name of Alan, and Alan's technique was to ask a lot of questions, but they were so what Alan had was the capacity to understand the answer to the questions and to logically think through why that answer was either correct or incorrect, or if someone's pulling the wool over his eyes, especially when you're managing big capital works projects. And you can't, I guess I came to the conclusion that you can't be an expert in everything yourself, but you can be an orchestrator of experts. And that's what he was, an orchestrator of the experts to get the outcome. I learned quite quickly that project management isn't about knowing all the answers. In fact, a lot of people would say it's not a technical discipline. And I disagree with them highly at the time and still do, that it's an incredibly technical discipline, but the discipline isn't about the technical deep dive. Discipline is around being able to extract the right information, process that in a way that lets you make decisions better. I think that's what AI is. it's a deep expert in a particular area beyond you or me. Even if it doesn't have to be particularly deep, actually, even to be beyond most of us in many things. But if you can use it to get an answer, and then you can use good judgment to determine whether that's the right answer or whether you should continue exploring more and then asking harder questions, diving deeper to suss it out. Like that, those are really valuable skills for, I think, the future of people's careers, for sure.
Agreed. I hardly agree. So we're going to do a series and go over some of these things and do some of these examples and show people. But
Yeah.
for now, if anyone wants to reach out to yourself or request Rocket, what is the best way they can do that?
Thank you. So you can reach me at alex@requestrocket.com. You can check out our website at requestrocket.com. Very simple to remember. And it's free to sign up and enjoy a gracious amount of quota to get started with our platform. But also, if you're interested in becoming a partner and working with us, or you're interested in what we're doing, you're more than welcome to reach out, have a conversation. There's a lot of stuff that we're doing in the next year I'm keen to talk about. And I'm on LinkedIn too. So you can hit me up on LinkedIn and follow there. But you should also follow Bora. If you're not, you should subscribe, because I do. And I'm keen to be back again, Bora. And thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. And yes, I look forward to our upcoming series. That's for sure.
Thanks to you, Bora, and thank you to the audience for taking the time to spend with us.